Welcome to today's GMAT Club live session. My name is Caroline Diarte Edwards. I'm a director at Fortuna Admissions, and I was formerly head of admissions and financial aid at INSEAD for the MBA program. And I'm joined here today by my colleague Melissa Jones, who was an assistant director at INSEAD, and I've had the good fortune to work with her for several years, both at INSEAD and now at Fortuna.
So hi everyone, thank you for joining.
So today's session is on how to get into INSEAD. So I'm just going to share my screen so that you can see my slides, hopefully. Can you see that, Melissa?
Not yet.
All right.
Sometimes it takes a minute to load.
All right.
There we go.
You see it now?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So that's our topic for today. Before we dive in to talking about INSEAD, just a few words about who we are in Fortuna Admissions. So Fortuna Admissions is a team of former gatekeepers from top schools. So we have a wonderful team of colleagues who've worked at the top international and US schools and who advise candidates applying to MBA programs. So our clients are typically young professionals who are looking to gain admission to the top MBA programs. And we'd be very happy to advise you. If you'd like to sign up for free consultation, please do. You can contact us at info@fortunaadmissions.com or sign up on the free consultation form on our website. So here are the topics that we wanted to cover today. So what we'll do is Melissa and I will talk about, for about 20 minutes, about our perspective on, why you should consider INSEAD, but then we'll get quickly into, the nitty-gritty of what INSEAD is looking for and how you can stand out in a very competitive applicant pool. We'll give you some tips on pitfalls to avoid. And then we'll get into the Q&A. So we'll have about 20 to 30 minutes for Q&A. So at any time when a question pops into your mind, please do enter it into the chat box. And then as soon as we're done with our presentation, then we will get to your questions. So very much looking forward to hearing your questions today. So why should you consider INSEAD? Some of you may not be so familiar with the school. So it is a top MBA program. And what do I mean by that? Well, it is highly ranked, and it's highly ranked because it's a school that has a long history of providing an outstanding education. So INSEAD actually pioneered the one-year format, the one-year MBA program about 60 years ago. And the school has attracted outstanding faculty from around the world who've shaped a really strong curriculum. So in terms of academic experience, it's really second to none. And that is recognized through, as I said, through the rankings and then through the students who apply. So you will be rubbing shoulders with a peer group of outstanding students from around the world. So, absolutely top-notch experience. A lot of people choose to apply to INSEAD because of the one-year program. So if you start in September, you will graduate the following June. If you start in January, you'll graduate in December with an 8-week break in the summer months to do an internship. And so, there are many benefits of that intense format, not least the financial impact of having to pay tuition for 1 year rather than 2, of foregoing salary for 1 year rather than 2. So INSEAD does very well in studies that look at return on investment, MBA programs. Mm-hmm. Access to global career opportunities. So the top employers who recruit MBA graduates around the world will be coming to knock on your door at INSEAD. And INSEAD graduates go and work in about 60 different countries around the world. So it's a fantastic springboard if you're looking to pursue a career at an international level. It's an incredibly diverse international program. So there's typically about 80 to 90 different nationalities on the program. There is no dominant culture, no dominant nationality. It's unusual that any individual nationality represents more than about 10% of the class. So it's incredibly diverse. You'll be working in teams of people who have very different background, very different experience, very different mindset to you. And that adds a huge amount to the richness of the learning experience. And then access to a global alumni network. So the INSEAD alumni have dispersed across the globe, and that's a wonderful resource for you if you're looking to work at an international level. So INSEAD alumni, I think there's 24,000 MBA alumni now working in 170 countries. So that's a tremendous asset to you when you graduate from the school, that you can tap into this network.
I thought I might add something here that Caroline is an alumnus herself, and my husband has also graduated from the program and I've done some of the executive education programs there. So both of us are closely connected with the school.
That's right. Very, very close to our heart, indeed. So what INSEAD is looking for, can you talk about academic capacity there, please, Melissa?
Yeah, so what INSEAD is looking for, there's 4 key criteria. So academic capacity, leadership potential, international motivation, and ability to contribute. So knowing these criteria, what you need to try to do is weave each of these into various aspects of your application and into your essays. So we're going to discuss each in detail. So I'll start with academic capacity. So this is obviously measured through the GMAT and the GRE. INSEAD's range is generally between 670 and 750. For them this past year, the average was 709. But generally, they're asking for people to try and aim in the 75th percentile for both quant and verbal, just to remain competitive. It's not entirely necessary because they are looking for a balance of your academics. So besides evaluating your GMAT, they're going to be looking at your undergrad, any master's degrees, or even any other courses taken. So these are clearly shown through the reports that you attach in your application. So it's a little bit more straightforward and for this criteria, so no need to repeat these in the essays. However, what we will discuss later is how do you address a low GPA perhaps, or for example, maybe your quant score is a bit on the lower end. So potentially you could address this in INSEAD's optional essay, but we'll talk about that a bit later.
Yeah. So as regards leadership potential, INSEAD is looking to bring in a cohort of students who will be very successful in their careers post-MBA in whatever sector and position they're looking to pursue. And there's no particular profile that they're looking for, but what the common trait is, they're looking for candidates who are ambitious and have already demonstrated a high level of achievement in their career. And the INSEAD Admissions Committee takes the perspective that, past performance is the best predictor of future potential. So when they're assessing your leadership potential, they're looking at, how you've demonstrated your leadership to date. Now, for some candidates, you might not have had the opportunity yet to take a leadership or management role at work. And most candidates are at a very early stage in their career. And so while some students or some candidates have already had some management experience at work, not everybody has. And so there are other ways that you can demonstrate that leadership potential. It may be through your extracurriculars. Perhaps you've coached a team, perhaps you've led a fundraising effort. There are lots of different ways that you can develop and demonstrate that leadership potential. So think broadly about that. And I'd also encourage you to think about breaking down the different elements of leadership. There are lots of qualities that contribute to leadership skills, and there are very different styles of leadership. And so I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about how you have demonstrated leadership skills and the elements that build up to leadership, whether it's communication, whether it's teamwork, whether it's influencing others, convincing others. There are lots of elements that are important to leadership, and you can break down those qualities and explain in your application how you've demonstrated those, and that will help to build your credibility as someone who's got good leadership potential post-MBA.
And next is international motivation. So unlike a lot of the US business schools, the international aspects are really important for INSEAD. So they're looking if you've worked abroad or studied abroad, or done an exchange, even if it was earlier on. But if not, that's okay. Maybe you've worked for a multinational. Do you have some international work you can speak to? Do you have international clients? Do you have very diverse teams from different countries? Do you conduct business maybe in different languages? So I often find that the latter, the things I just mentioned here, they're often overlooked, and then the candidates can skip over this information in their career essays, but that's a really great place to mention it. So your international aspects and experiences can really be woven into many places of the essays that are asked. So for example, there's an essay question 1, the first one where you can summarize your current job, or in essay 3 where it asks you about your career evolution over the years from previous jobs. So there you can mention things like these international clients or the travel that you do for work and your international teams. Same with that, there's an optional essay question that asks you what you would do if you were admitted to the program and what you would do before the start of the program. So maybe you've been thinking about studying that third language or another language, or maybe volunteering abroad or doing more travel. So if that's a plan for you, then that's a great place to show your future international experience. And then there's a candid description essay, which is the first motivational essay. And this could be also a theme where you can talk about your international experiences. So maybe you have a story around your first experiences on an exchange or living abroad. Maybe you moved around a lot when you were growing up. Maybe you come from a very multicultural background and practice different cultural traditions. What was it like for you when you worked in a new country or moved to a new country? So that kind of thing. If you want some more specifics on this, actually, Caroline and I, we did a video blog on this on INSEAD's international criteria, so which you can find on the Fortuna website under resources.
Great. And finally, the fourth element is ability to contribute. So here the school is looking to see what kind of student you will be. Are you someone who's going to come to campus and really get engaged in the life of the school? Because they're looking for students who are not just coming for the academic experience, and not just coming to get a great job afterwards, but also who are coming to really be members of the community and be very active members of the community, both while you're on campus and during the MBA program, but also as alumni when you graduate. So for this, they will be looking at evidence of what you've done outside of work and study, because they'll be looking to see, are you someone who's going to get involved in the life of the school? Are you someone who's going to join a club, maybe take a leadership role in a club, get involved in a sports team? And as I said earlier, past performance is the best predictor of your future performance. So they'll be looking to see what track record you have as regards your extracurriculars. So there is an essay specifically dedicated to your extracurriculars. So that's important to convey, what your interests are, what you've got involved in, past and present, so that the school can understand, what kind of things you may get involved in outside of the classroom. And then ability to contribute is also about, how you're going to engage in the classroom. Are you someone who is open to new ideas? Are you someone who likes to share your perspective? Are you someone who's going to work well in a team? So it's also looking at those softer skills. The INSEAD MBA is extremely interactive. You will learn a lot, if not more, from your fellow students than from the faculty. And so they really need students who are going to take advantage of that interaction, that sort of dynamic learning experience, and contribute to that. So they'll be looking to see whether you're someone who has a track record of really engaging well in teams. They'll also get a sense of this in the interviews and in the video questions that you'll respond to. So the INSEAD alumni that you will interview with will be commenting on this and whether they think that you would be someone that they would like to have had in their team at INSEAD. So it's something that's assessed from multiple elements of your application.
So there's someone that's watching that Shantanu that was asking, what does ability to contribute mean? So hopefully Caroline answered that for you. But
yeah, if you've got any other follow-up questions, do feel free to ask.
Okay, so next we're going to discuss how to stand out in the application pool. So just briefly, we'll talk about planning ahead, discover and explore your unique qualities, coach your recommenders, develop passion for your career vision, and be authentic. So planning ahead, what we mean by that is it's really important to plan ahead to pursue any MBA, even a year or two out, and start shaping that application to help you stand out. So especially if you're feeling you're falling short on some of the criteria that we just discussed, but also perhaps you come from a career like investment banking or consulting where the roles can be quite similar. So how do you stand out? So looking at work for particular projects that would have an impact you wouldn't normally have. So ask your supervisor for more leadership opportunities. Strive big at work. So for example, company awards and recognitions always add value in your application. So achieve high at work, meet or go above those targets, increase your revenue, bring on new clients or whatever the case is in your particular career to show great results. And then even outside of your regular job requirements at work, so, engaging in staff events, helping organizing team building events, participating in mentoring programs or charity events at work. So these are the kinds of things that you could be seeking out as you prepare 1 or 2 years out for your app. And so that's the career portion of it. But in terms of your extracurriculars, to help you plan ahead, think of things outside of work that come with opportunities to take on a leadership role. So to do something that's a bit different from your peers. So get more involved. If you used to volunteer and have stopped, it's time to start up again. Or maybe you have been volunteering for many years, maybe take on a bigger role there or more hours. Also keep up with your hobbies, start new ones, as these aspects are all super, super important to make a well-rounded candidate. Next would be kind of developing and maintaining relationships with your recommenders in advance. So if you have a couple of people in mind that you want to use, it can be hard to just ask someone out of the blue if you haven't been in contact with them for a while. So keep up those relationships, continue to nurture them, and also start to gauge if you want to ask your current supervisor or not. Some people are really hesitant to ask at work as they don't feel comfortable or they don't want to jeopardize their career in any way. So you'd be really surprised on how supportive they can actually be. So start thinking about how you might handle that situation. And then finally, the GMAT obviously takes a lot of planning. So how are you testing right now, 1 or 2 years out? If not so well from the get-go, maybe you have to start thinking about getting a tutor. And that can take a bit of time to figure that out too. So some people, may only need a few months of prep, but others need more a year or so. So it's not too early to start that process.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you, Melissa. So another point is about, related to planning ahead. You need to reflect before you jump into writing your essays and putting your application together. So I would encourage you to really take some time before you put pen to paper to think about, what are your strengths? What are your qualities that are maybe different from some of your peers? It can be very useful in that exploration process to get feedback from other people. So ask your colleagues, ask your boss, ask family and friends for some feedback on what they see as your strengths and their thoughts about what you've done that makes you different. That can be very insightful. You may get some surprises when you see what people come back with. So I would encourage you to go through that process, to think carefully about who you are today and how you've become that person and what has shaped you, and what are the key strengths that have brought you to where you are. Because having that sort of foundational understanding is super important, so that you can then build a coherent picture of who you are and convey your key strengths and your key qualities very clearly in your application, and also have some consistency in what you're saying about yourself and then what your recommenders are saying about you. So back to you for recommenders, Melissa.
Yeah, so it's also important to coach your recommenders. So INSEAD asks a specific set of questions around your strengths, around your weaknesses, and if they see you as a future leader. So before sending them that recommendation link in the application form, and then letting them complete it cold turkey, it's best to coach them and provide them with a bit of guidance. So, I would either sit down with them or provide them with a brief of strengths that you feel demonstrate, are demonstrated in any successful projects that you've worked on, all backed up by examples, just to refresh their memory. And even better, set up a phone call or in person afterwards, and then talk about what should and should not go into the recommendation. Because remember, they might not remember your successes in specific projects as well as you do.
Yep. And then another part of planning ahead is thinking about, what you want to do post-MBA, because INSEAD will ask you to write an application about, your post-MBA goals. And you should have, a clear view of what job you want when you come out of the program. And then also, how you see your career developing in the medium and long term. And it can take some time to figure that out. A lot of people, when they're entering this process and thinking about pursuing an MBA, know that they want to make some sort of change or they want to accelerate their career, but don't yet have a clear view of, what that looks like post MBA. So it can take some time. That's quite normal, but you should definitely, invest in that process before you start work on your application. And it may require some research. So, brainstorm some options of different career paths that you could pursue. And this is a great time to sort of take a step back from your career. And I'm sure you're very busy with demands of your day job and everything else that you're doing. And so, it's not always something that you necessarily dedicate a lot of time to. So take a step back and take stock of where you are in your career and dreaming about what you would like to do in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. So do go through that process, because that will help you understand very clearly, what you want to get out of the MBA program, and be able to convince the school that, you've got a clear plan. It's a realistic plan. I mean, that's important, right? There needs to be some connection between what you've done in the past, what you're going to learn on the MBA, and what you're going to do in the future. So there needs to be some sort of logical thread, even if you're planning a career change, which most candidates will be doing. But do invest some effort in that process. Do some research. You can network. It's great to reach out to people who are pursuing careers that you might aspire to, and have some discussions with them about what it means to be in that career, how they got there, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, how they see their career path evolving. So this is all great groundwork to do at least a few months ahead of starting to work on your application. And, this is something that you'll need to convey quite succinctly in the application itself, in one of the essays, but you'll need to explain it in more detail at the interview stage. So the interviewer might challenge you in your career vision, and they'll certainly want you to explain it, but they might also challenge you on that. So you need to really have your story straight and be convincing and genuine about, why you want to pursue that path.
Speaking of being genuine, the next point is being authentic. So in the application, it might sound cliche, but try not to be someone that you are not, because you think it's what the admissions committee is looking for. So Caroline and I have read many apps where we're almost reading like cookie cutter type answers, as we feel the candidate is just saying things that we want to hear. But really the most memorable and unique applications are when people are really true to themselves and the real you shines through. So you might find it difficult, but show your personality. If you have a sense of humor, show that sense of humor. If you're a creative writer, show that creativity. So be reflective, think back, way back, get personal, thinking of the stories that shaped who you are today. Feel free to talk about your hardships and what you learned from them and how those shaped you today. Be real. So show humility, and you definitely don't want to come across as arrogant or too braggy, but there are softer ways to talk about your accomplishments and how wonderful you are.
Great. So a few thoughts about common mistakes that we've seen candidates make in the past we want you to avoid. So one of the most common mistakes is rushing your application. And, all of you are busy, all MBA candidates, by their very nature have demanding jobs, busy lives. It is very hard to find the time to do, to really spend a lot of time on your application. And you've also got the GMAT or the GRE, etc. to do. So it is a very time-consuming process. So, as Melissa said, the planning ahead is really important. Work out your timeline so that you're not throwing together the essays or the, the data on the application form at the last minute. It's very apparent, to the file reader, if you've put things together at the last minute, often they'll see sloppy mistakes or, repetition or just, not clearly formulated responses to some of the questions. And it's such a shame. When I was admissions director, sometimes we'd end up rejecting candidates, not because the fundamentals were bad, but just, they had done a bad job in putting the application together and it was rushed, it was last minute, and that was very apparent. And it's a shame to have to turn down people who clearly have, a lot of potential, some great qualities, great credentials, but just haven't invested the time in the process. So, do plan ahead, factor in that, you probably have a buffer in your timeline because, you might get pulled into a project where you're working crazy hours and you don't have time that you would like to dedicate to your application. So just start early.
Okay. The next common mistake is a poor choice of recommender. So you need to find a recommender who can speak volumes about who you are, what you brought to the team, and who understands what you want to do next. So you should definitely use someone that is or was a direct supervisor and that knows you really well and for a good amount of time. So what you don't want to do is choose someone that is from too long ago, so a bit too outdated. They may have forgotten your experiences or skill set, and plus you've potentially grown since then. Someone to not choose is someone that doesn't know you too well, and you're just going for someone with a big title. So it might be tempting, to use your CEO, but if you don't work regularly with them, it won't do you any favors, and it will come across in the recommendation that they don't know you very well. Or if it's someone famous, for example, and that you don't really know them well, it's happened before. So also it's not so great to use just a peer. It would be best to use someone that is does have some seniority over you. And next, it's generally best to use 2 professional recommendations, not one from a personal or extracurricular context. Someone was asking, I think it was Archit in the session here, if it's best to use someone that has a business school background. So in that case, it goes back to my previous point in using the people that know you best and can speak to your skill set. So if that person happens to have an MBA, great. If they don't work with you too much in a professional context, then no, it's not as necessary. It's much more important to use someone that knows you well. Sometimes what you could do is, it can be beneficial for sure if someone has an MBA, because then they obviously know what skills it would take to get into that program, and if you would make a good fit for that program. But so what you could do is potentially submit the 2 recommendations, and then sometimes you can send in a letter on the side from this MBA person that maybe is your peer and just vouching for you, but it could be kind of a supplementary letter.
Next point is one of my pet peeves. So I included it here, even though it's quite detailed on one of the essay questions. So Melissa mentioned the first motivation essay, which is asking you for a candid description of yourself. And it's quite challenging, right? Because, you've got to describe yourself in 500 words. It's quite a difficult exercise to know where to start and where to end. But if you look closely at the wording in question, they're asking about your personal development, and it doesn't say professional development. And sometimes candidates write too much about the professional strengths and achievements in this essay. Now, if you look across the whole application, you'll see that the school has plenty of opportunity to learn about your professional experience. There are a number of career-focused questions in the application. That they will get your CV. They're going to hear all about your professional achievements, also from your recommenders, as well as, that's going to be something you'll discuss in the interviews, et cetera, et cetera. So they get a lot of opportunity to assess your professional experience. This essay is a great opportunity for you to tell a bit of your personal story. What is it that helped shape the person you've become today? You can go back to any point in time. You can write about, a formative period in your childhood, perhaps someone who really influenced you and mentored you and you looked up to. And so you've got a lot of scope here. But the essays that work the best for this question, they're really the ones that sort of delve into the personal story and get the file reader interested in who you are as an individual beyond your professional accomplishments and credentials, and get them interested so that they want to learn more, because how are they going to learn more? They're going to invite you to interview stage, and that's what you want to achieve with your written application if you want to get that interview invite.
Okay, next is the answering why INSEAD everywhere. So a lot of business school applications, they ask, why their school, how will our school help you achieve your goals, something like that. But INSEAD does not ask this. And so when candidates see that there is no question around it, they panic a bit and feel that they need to squeeze it into various parts of the essays. But the essay word counts are tight. So really stick to that, to answering that exact question that they're asking, and try not to veer off and talk about why INSEAD and how it will help you achieve your X goal or Y goal. So it's not what they want to hear. They used to have this question, but they took it out a couple of years back as they really focus more on this in the interview process.
Yeah. Your alumni interviews will ask you about why you're applying to INSEAD, so you can keep all those great points for them.
Yes.
So finally, overuse of the optional essay. So another of my pet peeves is that sometimes candidates will use the optional essay as an overflow from other essays. Mm-hmm. And as Melissa said, sometimes you do have a tight word count and it's challenging to say everything you want to say. And you won't be able to say everything that you want to say in the other questions, but don't be tempted to sort of copy paste some excess content from one essay into the optional essay. So topics that you should not be addressing in the optional essay are topics that are the right topic to address elsewhere in the application. So, and it does take some time to edit things down and get down to the right word count. But, you need to have that discipline to stick to that word count and not just use that essay as an overflow for excess content that you can't fit in elsewhere. On the other hand, there are some topics that are usefully addressed in the optional essay. So, for example, if you have some concern about your academic track record, maybe, you're a bit concerned about your GMAT score or your undergraduate track record. Maybe you've got a gap in your CV, in your career history, and you want the opportunity to explain that. So that's a great use of the optional essay because it's not something that you would necessarily have been able to address elsewhere. Another thing that you could write about in the optional essay, maybe, sometimes candidates have a side business or, something that they're heavily involved in work-wise that is not their day job. And in the career questions, those are really focused on your day job. So if you've got something else that you're doing, maybe, you're helping a friend with a startup or, you've got some side hustle going, then that's interesting. It's relevant to the school and you can include it here. But don't feel concerned if you leave that optional essay blank. That's absolutely fine. The essay is already quite long, and the file reader would much prefer that you leave that blank than you just use that space to fill it up. And as I said, it uses an overflow. It's not what they're looking for. So just use it for very specific reasons.
Just one more thing on that. We were talking a lot about recommenders. So you could actually use the optional essay to address why you're not being a current supervisor. since there isn't really an opportunity to do that anywhere else.
Yeah, great point. All right, so before we jump into the Q&A, just wanted to mention that we're very happy to chat with you about your MBA plans. So please do follow up with us to sign up for a free consultation. You can sign up on our website, fortunaadmissions.com, go to the free consultation form, or shoot us an email at info@fortunaadmissions.com.
So I just wanted to take one question, since we're just talking about recommendations. Someone was asking about adding an extra recommendation, and do you directly email the admissions committee or put that in the application? So you could do it it depends on, I guess, at what point you want to send that extra one. It's not necessary to add a third or fourth recommendation. If you did add a third, you could either upload it with the application on the last, I think it's one of the last pages of the application form. You can upload additional materials as an attachment, or once you have submitted your application already, and you were able to get maybe a Word document from somebody at a later date, you are matched up with someone in admissions once you've submitted your app, so you can email that person the additional letter.
Great. Okay.
So Caroline, yeah, there were a few questions here that I saw we could address. A lot of them we did address in the presentation, but if anyone did need some clarifications on any of them, just please ask again.
Yes.
So it was around the wait list. So we could talk about the wait list, and Sam's question is it common for INSEAD to roll people over to the wait list into the next intake?
Right. So the wait list, so generally, the school will use the wait list as a buffer to manage the class size. So if you're waitlisted, it means that they really like your profile. They see a lot of potential. They would like to offer you a place, but it's simply a matter of numbers, and they can't make offers to everyone that they would like to make offers to. So for each round, they'll waitlist a certain number of candidates. They try not to over waitlist because they don't want to put people on the wait list and have too many people there who won't ever get a chance of being admitted. So they are careful to manage those numbers. And the goal is to, hopefully a place will free up for you. And they manage the wait list on a regular basis. They're reviewing it regularly. So, for example, if you waitlisted after round 1, then the candidates who get a straight offer will have about 4 weeks to make their initial deposit. And then if they haven't done that, and if they withdraw and they don't accept the offer, then the school will start looking at, can we make offers to waitlisted candidates? How many people can we admit from the waitlist? And they'll start reaching out to waitlisted candidates then. So their goal is to offer you a place for that class, but it's not always possible. Occasionally, they may go back to candidates and say, we're not going to have a place for you on the wait list. We would encourage you to reapply for a subsequent class. That may happen. Occasionally, they may roll people forward to a subsequent intake, but that's not as common. Normally, if you get waitlisted, you'll either eventually get a spot, and that can happen, really up until the last weeks before the class starts. Or they will let you know ahead of time if they're definitely not going to be able to make you an offer, and then they'll let you know and cancel your spot on the wait list. And you can ask for feedback from the school if they would encourage you to reapply or not.
Great. Someone is asking, Arnav is asking, MBAs ask for an average work experience of 4 years, but I have a master's and 22 months work experience working in the US. Is it advisable for me to apply right now, or should I wait 2 more years?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. So I mean, the range of work experience is typically 2 years to 10 years. So you're well within that range. And also remember that when they're looking at how much work experience you have, they're not looking at it as of, the day you submit your application. They're looking at it to see how much work experience you would have by the time you start the program. So that may well add on another 6 months or so. So it could well be that you've got sufficient experience. What is more important than the length of experience is the quality of experience. And so someone who's coming into the program with, just 2 or 3 years work experience, will probably, already have demonstrated that they're on a fast track. They've already gained some, impressive responsibilities in a short amount of time. So, the school is very encouraging of people to apply at that stage if they've got, really strong work experience. And for candidates who are on the younger side, they'll also be carefully scrutinizing level of maturity, because they're looking to bring together a group of people who, will work well together. Even though they're coming from very diverse backgrounds, they want people to be able to, build strong relationships across the class. And so with the younger candidates, that's something they'll specifically be looking to assess in the written application, in the recommendations, and then in the interviews to see if you've got, the right level of maturity to join the INSEAD MBA.
Okay. There's a couple of questions around a master's in management there, and if there's, if the criteria is similar. We are mostly speaking about the MBA here. In general, the criteria would be similar, but I don't know, Caroline, if you want to comment a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So, and I was in touch with Virginie, who's the admissions director at INSEAD recently, and she's delighted with the applications that they've had for the Masters in Management, and very similar profiles to similar types of candidates that the school would get for the MBA, but an earlier stage in their career. So they'll also be looking at international experience, academics, internships, and so on. Evidence of your career vision, the soft skills, ability to contribute. So very similar elements. They're looking to, and this is something that's common across INSEAD, the type of people that the school will attract to the MBA or the Masters in Management or the Executive MBA, and even the Executive Education programs. People are typically, on a fast track, very smart, great credentials, and genuinely interested in being part of a very international community and learning from that community.
Okay, great. There's a question around the different rounds. So round 1 versus 2, 3, 4, and the selection difficulty with each, and funding and scholarships for each.
Right. Yeah. So INSEAD has 4 rounds for both intakes. And the school will try to keep the level of competition fairly equal across the rounds. So they'll forecast, how many applications they expect to receive, and therefore, how many places they can offer by round. But it can get tighter in the final round. So I would say, especially if you've got a somewhat common profile, perhaps you're an engineer or a management consultant or investment banker, it may be better to apply. Rather than applying in round 4, wait until the next intake and apply for the round 1 or round 2 for the subsequent intake. So, in some cases, it may be better to avoid round 4. And for scholarships, it's definitely better to apply in round 1 and round 2. There's more scholarship financing available for the earlier rounds than later on. So if that's important to you, then do apply early. Just bear in mind there is a lot of competition for the scholarship. So, INSEAD attracts a very diverse pool of candidates, and candidates coming from emerging markets who don't necessarily have the savings and ability to finance the program that somebody who's working in a more advanced economy may have had. So there is a lot of competition, and most of the scholarships have some merit element, but also a big component of financial need. And the school will look at to what extent you need the financial support. And given the number of candidates coming from emerging markets, a good chunk of the financial aid will go to those candidates.
Okay, and so just to confirm, there aren't as many scholarships in round 3, but there's absolutely none available in round 4, correct?
Right.
And Tanmay had a question also around the January and September intake, and in terms of difficulty getting in, and it's actually the exact same criteria. There's absolutely no difference in terms of the competitiveness. The only difference really between the September and January intake is that if you start in January, you have that opportunity to do the internship in the summertime.
Yeah, and that's important if you want to do investment banking. So if you're looking to make a career switch into investment banking, the banks typically use the summer internship as a recruitment mechanism. The school would advise you, if that's a career track that you're targeting, it's better to come for the January class than the September entry.
Great. So we have a few questions around the same topic, and that's age. So what's a good age? What's a maximum age, not just in terms of your age, but years of experience?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, so work experience is sort of 2 to 10 years. Sometimes people will have a bit more work experience than that, but typically the candidates who have more work experience are on the upper edge of that range. They don't have a typical MBA profile. So it may be that they're coming from journalism, or they're a lawyer or a doctor or something that is not a typical pre-MBA track. So it's very unlikely that someone who's an MBA, who's a management consultant for 10 years will then go off to do an MBA at INSEAD. If you're a management consultant, you're probably going to do your MBA much earlier than that. So for the upper age and work experience range, the school is looking more at the diversity of the profile. Whilst there's no, hard and fast age range, it's typically sort of 23 to 35, and it's quite unusual that someone outside of that range will get into the program. And for someone who's in their mid-30s or above, then the school may well see that candidate as a better fit for the executive MBA. And sometimes people apply to the MBA and the school will channel them towards the executive MBA and ask them to be considered for the EMBA, because they see that as a better fit for that candidate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a question around coming from a different career background, like manufacturing, kind of non-traditional business background perhaps, and how does one plan for the post-MBA goals and the essays?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, it's really the same for everyone. I mean, most people are looking to make some sort of career change, and about 80% of the INSEAD graduating class will make some change in their career. And the school looks at change across 3 dimensions. There's change of function, so maybe you're working in finance and you're going to switch to marketing. There's a change in sector, industry sector, and there's a change in geography. A lot of people may be looking to move to work in a different country. So 80% of the class are making some sort of change across those dimensions. And typically around a quarter of the class are changing across all of those dimensions. So, if you're looking to make a career change, that's absolutely fine. If it's a big change, if you're looking to go into something that's very different from what you've done in the past, then you need to think about, what skills you've developed that will be relevant for your future career and conveying those. Because the school, as I mentioned, they do want to see some logical thread between what you've done in the past, what you're going to learn at the MBA, and then what you're going to do post-MBA. And because you've got to, they're also looking at your application with a perspective of a future employer and looking at, are you employable? Are recruiters going to be attracted to interview you? And also, can we help you achieve these goals, right? They don't want to admit candidates who want to do something that's so unrelated to what they've done in the past that it's very unlikely that they're going to land that job post-MBA. They don't want to bring people in who are going to be disappointed. So if you're looking at making quite a dramatic career change, drill down into the skills that you've developed and how those skills may be transferable to your post-MBA role. And think about, start thinking already about, how you're going to sell yourself to a future employer, because that's also, what the admissions committee is thinking about. How are you going to look to a post-MBA employer, and are they going to be interested in interviewing you? So, start preparing that well ahead of time, and do your research. Sometimes candidates have, they have a sense of the direction they want to go in post-MBA, but they haven't taken the time to really research, the companies that might be a great fit for them, or what the role actually entails on a day-to-day basis. And whilst you may not need to write about that in the application itself, because you've got quite limited space in the written application to talk about your career vision, that's something that you might need to discuss in some detail at the interview stage, or even in one of the video questions that comes up that you need to submit. So, do invest some time up front in preparing that.
Great. So Suman is asking, is it necessary for someone to have international exposure with respect to education as well as job experience for getting admission into INSEAD? So I covered a lot of talking about the international aspects. There isn't one specific thing you don't need in terms of the internationalism. If you've had that experience in your education, great, you should mention it. If you don't, that's fine. You won't be judged on that. They'll look at things, even if you were moving around a lot when you were just a kid, that could be something to comment on in your essays. It's not just about work experience, or maybe you have no international work experience, but you have done a lot of exchanges or lived abroad before. So it's really just showcase what you can, and there isn't one specific thing that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Context. There's another question by Jayesh about GMAT, and if there's a cutoff score for INSEAD. So there isn't really a specific cutoff score, not for any school, really. INSEAD, even though it is one of the top schools and most competitive, in terms of GMAT, they're a little bit more flexible than the US schools in terms of the range. So the range is, can be from 650 to 750, really every year. It's a bit different. The average is 709 right now. There isn't it really, they're looking at your whole application, all the aspects and all the criteria that we were talking about previously.
Yeah. And the school, more than the total GMAT, the school will look at the breakdown. So they like to see ideally 75th percentile or above on both the quant and the verbal, and then an IR score of 7 or above. So that's the ideal. If you're in that range, then you're in a good position. If you get above that, then fantastic, right? That'll be a strength in your application. But if you're below that, you might want to think carefully about retaking. Sometimes candidates may apply with a weak GMAT, but they've got a fantastic undergraduate track record, and otherwise their profile is very, very strong. So the school can be a little bit flexible on the margins with the GMAT, but actually sometimes less so than other schools, and that's partly because it's a one-year program. So it's very intensive, right? You'll have, you'll start the program, and 8 weeks later you're sitting exams. The pace is fast. So they don't have leeway to bring in candidates who are going to struggle to get up to speed and struggle to adapt to the fast-paced academic environment. And they have less leeway with that than, even schools like Harvard Business School or Stanford, because of the intensity of the format.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we only have time for a couple more questions, and I see there's still a few questions to cover. Jeet is asking about, do business schools like INSEAD turn an eye away from accounting professionals, or in that case, it could be, any, as we talked about, non-traditional or no, that is traditional career path, but a specific career path that they turn their eye away from any particular career?
No, I mean, so no one is blacklisted for a particular career, not at all. I mean, it's true that there are certain career paths that are overrepresented in the applicant pool, and so then you have to work a bit harder to differentiate yourself amongst the large pool of, management consultants or engineers or whatever it may be. There's no, what they're not looking for a particular career path or looking to avoid a particular career path. It's more about the quality of your experience and what you've learned from that, and the accomplishments that you've demonstrated, the skills that you've developed. So that's absolutely fine. The school will welcome applications from accountants as well. And there'll always be, people coming in from accounting firms to the MBA program. So, you just need to look at showcasing the quality of your experience. And then switching to a different career too. Yeah, so that's fine. I mean, that's not at all an uncommon path to, work for an accounting firm and then switch into strategy consulting afterwards. That is a fairly well-worn track, so that's fine. No issue at all. I mean, a lot of the skills that you will have developed as an accountant will be relevant for a future in management consulting, because you're dealing with clients. You're probably very comfortable with numbers and doing analysis and so on. So you will have developed a lot of relevant skills that could be very useful in a future career in strategy consulting. So I would encourage you to feel confident about pursuing that path.
Okay. Someone's asking about what factors should be considered when selecting the INSEAD campus, what are the differences between Singapore and Fontainebleau campus. So, I can answer that. And the admission has a completely blind eye to which campus you're selecting. So it has nothing to do with your application. They only look at that after the fact. So the real difference between it is, well, you have to think about where you want to be. So you do have to do 5 different kind of semesters there, if you will. So do you want to spend most of that time in France or in Singapore? You do get to switch campuses throughout your 10-month program, but you have to think about where you want to end up. So are you more interested in working in Europe? Maybe you want to spend more time on the Fontainebleau campus, or are you interested in working in Asia? So you probably want to focus on the Singapore campus. The differences, really, there's quite a few differences, obviously, in terms of culture and feel. The Singapore campus is a bit smaller, whereas the Fontainebleau campus is more like the hub of the school. So it's really best, if you can try and, get not just in terms of your post-career goals, but have a chance to visit the campuses too. And you will have that opportunity, to exchange between the 2 campuses. Okay. Let's see, I think, should we do one more question? There was a question here from, I just lost it here. It's a very common question from, if you're coming from a country like India with a lot of software engineers, how can I stand apart from them in terms of work experience?
Right. So you need to think about, what makes you stand out versus your peers. So from what you know about the work experience of people who followed a similar path to you, what is a bit different about your experience? Melissa talked earlier about planning ahead, and that planning ahead can be particularly helpful for common profiles, because, if you're thinking about this a year or 2 years ahead, you can be proactive about seeking projects that will help you to stand out, or somehow differentiating your work experience. So that advanced planning can be really useful for those common profiles. And then otherwise, the school is looking for, a track record of achievement. So it's super important to convey in your application, what you've achieved. If you can quantify that where possible, that's great. Talk about not just what you've done, but the impact that you've had. That's really important. Identify your transferable skills. So if you're looking to do something different post MBA, make sure that you convey clearly what are the skills that you've developed that will be relevant to your future career. So don't just talk about, the nitty gritty of what you've done, but talk about it in terms of, how you've developed teamwork skills, how you've developed management skills, how you've developed communication skills, how you've developed client management skills. Those are all super transferable post MBA. A mistake that sometimes engineers make in their applications is when they talk about their job, it's just too bogged down in the detail, technical detail. So try to avoid using jargon, because the file reader may not be familiar with your particular career track or the technicalities of your role. So try to avoid being too technical in the way that you talk about what you've done, and focus on, the management side, focus on the soft skills that you've developed. That will all help. And then, of course, Melissa talked about coaching your recommenders, and, the same goes for them, right? They need to highlight not just the technical aspects of your achievements, but the impact that you've had, how you work with other people, how you stand out. What they say about how you stand out versus your peers is super helpful, because they can compare you to a larger peer group, and they have credibility when they talk about how your impact has been greater than other people at your level that they've observed. So, all of that input is very helpful. And then, if you can differentiate yourself also through your extracurriculars, if you've achieved something special outside of work or study, that's really useful. You can differentiate yourself through your international experience. So there are lots of opportunities. The nice thing about the INSEAD application is that although it's a bit longer than other applications, that does give you some scope to tell different parts of your story, which might be more difficult to get across in other applications for other schools. So, take advantage of that to show, multiple dimensions of who you are.
Okay, I'm just going to answer really, really briefly Shashank's question. Is INSEAD accepting GRE scores? Yes. And Abhishek about military experience? Yes, definitely something to highlight as well in your application. So just as a last question, we do appreciate all of your questions and happy to answer them if you shoot us an email afterwards. This one, I've lost it in a thread, but it's around a recommendation if you work for a family business, or maybe you work for a startup and your partner is your wife or something like that. So how do you handle those kinds of recommendations?
Right. Yeah, that's not uncommon as a challenge. So if you're working in a family business environment, or it's not obvious who to choose for your recommender. First of all, I would try to avoid choosing a family member as a recommender. And I've seen recommendations from husbands, from wives before. It doesn't carry as much weight as someone who's seen as a more objective judge of who you are and what you bring to the table. So one option may be, an external business partner or an external client. If you're working in a family business, you probably have contact with people outside of the firm. Ideally, if there's someone you work with on a fairly regular basis who can comment on your performance, that would be great. But it's difficult to advise without understanding the specific circumstances. So, I would encourage you to sign up for a free consultation, and, we'd be happy to advise you further on specific circumstances and how to handle it. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Great questions. Really good to see the engagement. And as I said, we'd love to hear from you. Please do check out our website and sign up for a free consultation, or shoot us an email at info@fortunaadmissions.com. And we look forward to helping you secure your place at business school. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.